Hello, folks. Welcome back. So last time, if you remember, we had left off at the point where we were discussing about Dhritarashtra and how his blindness represents the ignorance that is there in man. And we will see what kind of ignorance this is, because this is not that not ignorance in terms of we don't know physics or we don't know a certain thing. It's more subtle than that, and we will see what it is. And this ignorance gives rise to many things, but the chief of that is called as ahankara, which is ego. So this aspect of Mahabharat, where we are studying the different traits or characteristics that a person, a human being has, that is reflected in the different characters that are being played in the Mahabharata. This is one of the main characters that is there. So we are going to traverse this tree and explore the different characters that are there and what they represent before we again start back with our study of the Bhagwad Gita. So the next character that is there that we would like to see. Now, what I am doing here is the character that I will be talking about is presented in this color, and those that we have already talked about are then changed into this green color. So we are going to go through this entire chart till all of it becomes green, and one by one we'll be talking about the things that are there here. So now you remember that Vyasa with Sudri, and you remember the reason why this is a dotted line is this is kind of that gray area where how exactly the child is born is vague, but Vidur, who represents the conscience of man, he represents the conscious that is in man, who is always pulling back when we are going to commit some mistake, or we know that we are going to do something wrong. How do we know that what we are going to do is wrong? It is our conscience telling us that you should be doing this. Sometimes we listen to it, sometimes we don't, sometimes we are unable to, even if you want to. So these kind of situations you will encounter quite often in the entire Mahabharata, where Vidur and Dhritarashtra are exchanging a lot of different opinions and views, and every step of the way, Vidur is challenging Dhritarashtra. When he takes a wrong step, Vidur is there, which kind of what happens in our life as well. Every time we take a wrong step, the conscience is there, is to correct it. Not much about it is discussed in the Bhagwad Gita, but it is an important character to know about. I had mentioned earlier that the Mahabharata is divided into separate parvas. There it is an enormous text. The Bhagavad Gita happens to be in the Bhishma Parva, but before that, there is a parva where uh, the discussions of Vidur are discussed in great detail, just like we have got the Bhagavad Gita talking about Sri Krishna and Arjun. There is a section on Vidur Niti, where Vidur's insights into the principles of life are discussed at great length. We are obviously not going to get into that. It would be a discussion for some other time. So let's look at the next character that we have here. Now, we know that Ambika and Ambalika, they gave birth to children, Dhritarashtra and Pandu. Now, Pandu happens to die, but he is present for when the kids are born here. One thing that I want to state is this classification, this identification of traits of characters in Mahabharata with the different things that make up a human being from a subtle perspective. This is not as hard and fast. It's kind of an arbitrary classification, but you get the principle, you get the idea. You might call certain things by certain different names. It's not that black and white, but you get the idea that this is what is being talked about here. So the what we are going to see here is quite at the surface. We cannot drill down too much. We don't want to drill down too much into it because they are after all more technical details that don't affect our understanding of the core principle that we want to get into. Nevertheless, so what happens is when a child is born, when a person is born, he has developed inside of him different kinds of things before his birth takes place. Even after we are alive, we can have the same kind of analogy. For example, if there is no mechanism in our brains, in our body, to assimilate, to understand the sensus inputs that an eye receives, we will not be able to see. So the eye, it looks, it sees something. Well, the first thing is light needs to fall on an object. It goes and hits the eye. It actually goes and hits the retina of the eye. And there is actually a transference of energy that takes place. There is photons of light that come and hit the retina. And there is actually an electrical signal generated inside the retina. Just like we have got an ECG where we measure the electrical behavior of the heart, the electrocardiogram. There is also such similar signal for the eye. It is called as an electroretinogram. No surprises there. But there is a waveform there, and actually something interprets that waveform, and that's where really vision takes place. So as such, man is roughly divided into three parts. There is this outermost body that is there, and then there is a subtle body in him. We have got emotions. We have got some reasons why we decide to see something or hear something. So there is a subtle aspect of it. And then there is an even finer aspect of it, where there is the actual conception taking place of things that are happening around a person, a human being's world around him. Roughly, we can equate to that, and you can call it by different names. But in the Vedantic or the Vedic text, again, here too, there are several names by which these things are called. But we have got here something called as the subtle, causal, and physical body that I have shown here. And there is another deeper explanation that if we get a chance, we might get into the different koshas that are there. Now, the number 5 happens to come a lot in many of these texts. There is something called as a Pancha Mahabhuta, like 5 main elements. We have got the 5 senses. So this number 5, that's, one might be tempted to think that the 5 senses represent the 5 Pandavas, but it's not like that. I mean, you could look at it like that, find out some kind of rational thinking about and justify, why something is one of the senses. But that's not what we are doing here. So there is a principle behind which a physical manifestation of things happen. Let's keep it at that, and that is very easily we can relate that to Kunti. Kunti happens to be the mother of the Pandavas, so obviously She is the reason why the Pandavas exist. And roughly we can equate to something that is called as the causal body. It's called as the Karana Sharira. And we there's a lot of very interesting discussions and details about in excruciating detail about how all this is configured, how this works, how one state impacts the other and all that. But so Kunti represents the causal state, and Pandu is representing the subtle state. Now, what happened is that when uh, Kunti was, I hope you remember the story, that Kunti was given this boon that she could interact with one of the any of the heavenly gods and have a son from them. So she happens to wants to test this boon, and so she happens to ask the sun god, and from him she gives birth to this son called Karna. There is a lot of controversial, interesting, conflicting information that is there around this character of Karna. And there is such overwhelming discussion around why certain things that he has done are right or wrong. And it's a very it's a character full of conflicts, very baffling, and you are lost why he had to suffer some of the things that he suffered in life. It was his life is a story of complete injustice. One might think, um, if you look at just the story, that is what one might think about. But here we are going to take a different perspective. There are two perspectives in which we are studying this. So in one perspective that we are looking at, Karna is representing the ultimate physical manifestation of the forces which drive the birth of a person. So this physical body that is there, that kind of represent Karna. Now, if you happen to lose an eye, you still live, right? So in that sense, although it is the eventual manifestation of a person, it is not really the exact core life of a person. It is not the person himself. It is the body of the person. I will say how interestingly this manifests itself. So let me go to the next character that we want to take a look at. So after this blunder that took place, where Kunti before her marriage gave birth to Karna, and she had to release him in the river, and then the charioteer, he took Karna and he brought him up, and that is why his one other name that Karna is called by is called Radheya. Radheya means the son of Radha. Radha happens to be the wife of the charioteer. Nevertheless, we just saw Karna in our previous discussion. The next son that Kunti sought for was from Dharmaraj. So he is Yudhishthir. Yudhishthir represents Dharma. So Yudhishthir is also, just like Dhritarashtra represents, I didn't mention this, but he represents the dark side of the ego, whereas Yudhishthir is a representation of the somewhat good side of the ego. Now, Yudhishthir is a representation of the righteousness in man that is manifest in man, and it is very close to the way Vidur is. It's very close to the way our conscience is more at a subtle level. It is not so much at the physical manifestation level of manifestation level. So what happens is that when a person acts, there's a lot of things happening before the action takes place. You go and unbolt the door to your of your home, or you go and open the door of your car. Whereas seemingly it is a very ostensibly simple action that you did. You just went and you opened the door. As simple as it may seem, there is a lot of things that have gone into this very simple act. And not just that, only because you are physically able to do that, can you do it? You may not be physically able. You may not be able to open the door. So why would you want to open this door? So that's kind of a, something happened that, you wanted to go and buy something. So this thought has occurred somewhere. And then that thought, it works with other thoughts. There's kind of a decision tree that it works with, that, okay, so I need to do this, and therefore I need to do this, and therefore I need to do this. And the eventual culmination of all that chain of thoughts that took place in your brain, in your mind, has led to this action where you eventually go and open the door of the car. So it's, although it might seem simple, it's not that obvious. So from the point of the rise of a particular thought at a point in the mind and the brain to the point where an action takes place, there are several layers that take place. The outermost layer, which we discussed, is where karna is there. Karna is the actual physical place where this takes place. But in order for Karna to do what he's supposed to do, there is a step that happens inside. This was one step that has happened because of which he went and he did what he did. So in this world of layers, in this strata that is there, the place that the conscience occupies is much higher, and the place that Yudhishthira is occupying is somewhat closer to the actual physical manifestation of things. So there's a difference between this consciousness and this sense of righteousness that is there in man, that is governing his actions, or at least attempting to knock some sense into a person when he is about to do something, especially when he's about to do something that he knows is incorrect. This word that you may have seen often or will come across often is the word dharma, and we talked about this at length in one of our initial sessions. But one of the things about dharma is that it is a law, a rule. So there are so many examples you can think of where there is conflict. You happen to be a doctor and you get somebody, there are two people who come to you, and one of them is known to you and the other is not. They're equally hurt. Who would you pick? Or maybe one guy is more hurt than the other. So you should be, I don't know, maybe logically you should help the one who is more hurt. But then you say, I know this guy, I will help him first. Or you are taking an exam, you're correcting papers, answer sheets from students, and you happen to know a student that is there. Then how do you rate? You can think of many such examples, and all of us run into these kind of things in our life every day, every moment, which is exactly why the Bhagwad Gita has so much of relevance, because it talks about these things that we run into every day. Okay, let's look at the next character that is there. So now we look at the next son of Kunti, and his name is Bhima. there was some problem with my clock, so I had to pause the recording. So I don't know, I might be off by some time when we finish today's session. Well, we'll see. Yeah, so the next force that we are going to talk about is Bhima, which is, when I say force, it is Kunti's next son. Kunti had 3 sons. There are 5 Pandavas, but Kunti had 3 sons. Actually 4 if you consider Karna. So the wind god Vayu is whom Kunti approached, and the son that she got from him was Bhima. Bhima is described to be having enormous strength, huge body, and he represents one of the strongest characters, physically strongest characters that are there in the Mahabharata. So in our discussion that we are doing, what does he represent? So he represents the subtle forces that enliven the body. So he is the prana forces. What is prana? So there is a lot of, again, discussion around that. There's plenty of texts that you will find that go into great detail about the different pranic forces. But very in general, the breathing that we do, the oxygen. In fact, oxygen is called as pran vayu in the Sanskrit texts. So these forces that are inside, of the subtle forces that are inside of us, those are represented by Bhima. Now, of all these forces that are there, and we can get into all the different things are there, which we don't want to. The one thing that we want to take note of is his representation of a person's ability to focus or concentrate. So one of the things that is said about Bhima is he had the strength of 100 elephants or 1,000 elephants, whatever number you want to pick. What that translates is that this capacity in us to focus on things, to concentrate on things. Meditation is another word for that, focus and concentrate. So any problem that comes to us, we are only limited by our strength, our degree of concentration or focus that is there, that we can apply towards understanding or solving this problem. So this is the representation of that capacity of a person. Now you could use that in so many ways, right? You could apply this capacity to understand more about whatever it is you do in your job. You might be doing some software engineering work. You work in some language, so you can apply your mind and be good at that language. Or you can use that and you can play football. Same kind of the main thing, the main thread that is there is the same thing. You focus and apply and you become a good football player. You generally, if you become very good at something, you're not that good at some other thing, which is fine. You will say, what is the yardstick of success for a regular common man? Like he made a lot of money and he has got power in the sense that, in his company, he owns a company and there are 100 people in there, whatever some idea of power you might be having. So in that yardstick of success, wherever you apply this mind, this capacity, this attribute is a very wrong word, but this thing that we have within us to apply our mind to, you apply it to good things, you get good results. Good is again a relative term here, but in general, if you apply it towards bad thing, I don't know, you are trying to cook some, methane, or what is that? Some kind of substance, controlled substance. drugs. You are a chemist or you're studying chemistry, and it's not an easy equation that you can cook up in a lab. You apply your mind, you figure it out, and you probably can do it. So anyhow, so it's a power within us that is subject to how it gets applied. In and of itself, it is powerful, but its application is going to decide its utility towards that person's well-being. So that's what Bhima represents. Let's look at next force that we are talking about, and that is Arjuna. And Arjuna is the central character in the Bhagwad Gita. All the 18 chapters is the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. Now, Kunti approaches Indra. Who is Indra? Indra is the god of the heavens. So there are all these gods in heaven, and Indra is the god of gods. So he represents the king of gods. So she approaches him, and the son that she derives from him is Arjuna, who is the hero of this entire Mahabharat. Well, at least the part where most of the action is there. Arjuna is involved. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this before I move on to the next character, because this is obviously the main character that we want to be aware of. Bhima is also there, but more so Arjuna. So this Indra, who is the king of the gods, there is another version of this whole view of the gods sitting in heaven and Indra is sitting as the leader or the head of these gods. And that is that these gods, they represent the different senses, the different kind of organs. In the technical Vedantic philosophy, there are different kinds of organs. There's the organs of actions, organs of knowledge. There's just Pancha Jnanendriya, Karmendriya, and so on and so forth. There are different, they have divided it into different categories, and they are very arbitrary. You can, once you know them, you can, if you want to, form your own definitions. Doesn't make sense, but you could very well, as long as you know what you're talking about. So these organs that are there that make up our body, that's one representation that is there of Indra. So the controller of all these is Indra, is what is being said. And so the son that she got from Arjuna, roughly, he equates to the mind and the intellect. Now, this is where all things are happening. When you act upon something, the mind is kind of, it plays a major role as a triage agent. So there's most of the time, it will have an idea of where things are coming from. It might even originate a lot of things. Many times, it's actually influenced by other things, and it has to work with those other things. So there is, what do I mean by there? That you have some kind of habits. You go to work every day, you go out of your home and you drive straight from your street, and then you take a right turn. And then on the first corner, you stop at the Starbucks, you pick a coffee, and then you get into your car, you keep driving, and then you take a left turn. Yeah, like 2 or 3 things. And you have been doing this for 10, 20, 2 decades maybe. So now your hands, your whole body is kind of is trained into that as muscle memory. You go there, and today you know that you have to go to some other place. This is not where you want to go. But even without your knowing, your hand will turn. You will go and stop at the Starbucks. You might even go inside, And then you realize, what am I doing here? I was supposed to. So that's what I'm saying, that in this case, the mind, it was aware that it had to do XYZ things, but there's the influence of these past habits, past actions that are there that force it, or subconsciously it ends up doing something that, now in this case, this was a very naive example. Nobody got hurt, nothing else. So you just realize, you made a mistake and you fix it. You take the right turn and you go and do whatever it is that you're doing. So this mind is working at that level, in these different levels that we spoke of. The mind is working at that intermediate level. It plays a key role in managing those thoughts that eventually get translated into actual physical actions. And it is not just actual physical actions, but it is also some actual tangible experience. Experience is a far better word than action. So the thoughts that arise in mind, they eventually, sometimes this journey from the rising of a particular thought in the mind to its eventual culmination / termination into an experience might be instantaneous. In a few seconds, you might experience the experience. Sometimes it might take days, sometimes hours, sometimes 2 decades. You don't even know that this thought had arisen there. So it's very complicated. It's in a very complicated place, and it's doing a complicated job. And not not to be very surprised, but because of what it is doing, it's kind of sometimes, for lack of a better word, it's in a state of frustration. And all these other things around it are there to guide it, but it is kind of the main acting thing, whether that is Yudhishthir. So the conscience is telling him, do this, do that. Dharmaraj is telling him, do this, do that. They're telling him the right things. And now he has got Bhima at his hand. He's like, Bhima, you come and focus on this thing. He's doing all kinds of these kind of management. And so one won't be surprised to see that sometimes it gets frustrated. And then all of us know that we make mistakes, and these mistakes range from simple mistakes to grave ones. And even the definitions of what is a simple mistake and grave mistake, it changes. And then we are a prey to the eventual emotion that arises out of this, and you are either sad or happy or in despair. Or so in fact, the first chapter that we are looking at is called as Arjuna Vishada Yoga. And that the title itself, it means the despair of Arjun. And this is not the time where we get into what the word yoga means, but in general, the title is what that means. And now you can roughly relate that why this is being said. Why is he in despair? Because he is in that kind of a situation. And we will see how bad that situation he is in is. And then you will understand, you will be able to justify, or you will be able to sense why he is in that state, because you yourself can relate to it. That I myself, I am in those kind of states. Not that it's not that of an uncommon occurrence. So Arjun here is playing a pivotal role, and then around him there are some other players that are there that we'll see in a bit. So let me go to the next character that we are talking about. So now that we are finished with Kunti's sons, there is Pandu had another wife, Madri, and she had two sons, Nakul and Sahadev, and they represent the subtle aspects of the mechanism in which we conceive things. As I was mentioning to you before, there is two parallel worlds. There is the physical world, and sitting behind that physical world, complementing that, is a subtle world, which is what the twins they represent. So what do I mean by that? That merely having ears is not sufficient for us to be able to hear. There is a processing mechanism that sits behind the ear that processes it and then gives it to another layer. We are not talking about that third deeper layer. This is the layer that sits immediately below the or behind the physical layer. The eyes, they work with external stimuli, they collect the information and they hand it over to an immediate next layer which does the processing. After this processing has been done, then that chunk of information is passed over back to some other center in the brain where actual cognition takes place. So for each of these senses that we have got a corresponding subtle sense. There is a gross sense and there's a subtle sense. So they come in pairs. So that is what these represent. Again, this is an arbitrary mapping of things. And it doesn't matter how you map this, as long as you have some idea about what is going on. Because when it comes to the core problem of why man suffers and how Bhagwad Gita or the Vedanta is trying to address this problem, that is where our focus should be, not into splitting our hairs on, this definition doesn't exactly match this. That is fine. It may not, or we shouldn't get hung up on that. So these subtle forces, the subtle senses, which actually make the external gross senses functions, are not just limited to the physical sense organs that are there. They go even one layer inside where there is some kind of, you play chess and you derive pleasure out of it. So there's that kind of thing too. So it's a coordination of a bunch of things. And on top of that, there's something else happening. We don't want to split our hairs on this. It is absolutely not required. It is in fact a waste of time to drill down further into this and find out exactly what happens where. Science is taking care of those things. They come up with wonderful things. They know how to address it, and that's a whole different stream, which is not the main focus of our study over here. Okay, so going forward. Now, let's come to Duryodhan. Duryodhan is Dhritarashtra's son, and he is playing an equally key role. He's the counterpart of Arjun. Almost all throughout the Mahabharata, he is dominating a lot of the scenes that take place, and rightfully so. What does Duryodhana represent? Duryodhana represents the bad desires, bad habits that have grown in man due to various reasons. And that is a very good name for that in Sanskrit, which is called vasana, which I have written over here. So these vasanas, now I will give you a simple example that some of you might be able to relate to. Others can think of something similar, but one of the very simple things is, supposing you have some kind of even minor addiction. It's like you don't need to be a drug addict. Somebody is addicted to smoking. You might be chewing betel nut. You might be used to read or a tea. Yeah, that's a better example because that's more common. So you to 7 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning, you have to have tea. It's you get up in the morning. If you don't get that cup of tea, you are miserable. Your whole day is kind of disturbed and lost, and you're not energetic and all that. If you continue to do that for some time, maybe things will get better. But at least you have been doing it for some time, and now you don't get that cup of tea. Take this example and amplify it 1,000 times, 10,000 times. That is what Duryodhana is. He is going to make your life hell because he represents some desire that we have that we are incapable of satisfying or fulfilling. And the desires roughly are of two kinds, where you say, I want my desire is I want to buy a lottery ticket for $10 million. And maybe you go and buy the ticket and you don't win, but you are not that bothered. Maybe you feel a little bit bad about it. I didn't win, and you will go and buy 10 more tickets. Maybe the next time I will win. That's one kind of thing. But then there is another kind of thing where it hurts. It hurts you. You desire for something and it doesn't take place. And then it hurts you. And you sometimes are aware that it is an unfair desire of mine. Maybe I should aim lower. This again has got its tricky aspect. There'll be all these motivational guys who are going to say, not failure, but low aim is crime. That is not what we are talking about here. But we are talking about desires from a negative sense. They constantly hover around you. They will not let you do whatever you think you are supposed to be doing is right. That is what Duryodhana represents. He represents these extreme negative desires that are there in life. What is worse is we so many times don't even recognize them. Their camouflage is so supreme that somebody has to really knock a lot of sense into your head before you even begin to look and recognize this is not a good desire. This is a bad desire that has kept me unsettled and kept me miserable for so long. You don't even realize that. Just like I was saying, that there is a thought that takes place in the mind, and it is a long time before you see the actual experience of that thought. The experience can be in the form of physical action, or it can be in the form of some emotional experience. You could get happy or you could get sad. So this whole tumult, this whole, I don't want to use the word conundrum, but the whole convoluted thing that is going on of this world of desires that make up a big part of what we are, why we are called man. This mass of things that is there, its manifestation from a physical world, from an emotional world, is the rest of the Kauravas that are there. So Dhritarashtra had 100 sons. Now, I had mentioned to you earlier that there are many things in Mahabharat that one can object to and say, this just doesn't make physical sense. Bhima having the strength of 1,000 elephants. Are you nuts? Have you ever seen such a person who has got Forget for one elephant. Have you seen a person who has got that kind of strength? Or the kind of thing that they used, they were the Pandavas or some of these generals that were in the army. They had weapons where they could string their bow and fire from their quiver, and it would rain, or it could rain fire upon the enemy. And maybe some of this you might be able to justify, but so there are these things. So this is one of them, that Dhritarashtra had 100 sons. Now, if you think about it, how if you start doing the math, you're getting to get into a rabbit hole that is absolutely not asked for. That is not why you should study the Mahabharat or the Bhagwad Gita. So now I hope you can see what it is trying to tell us. It is telling us that this mind of ours, this person of ours, is filled with these desires that we have, and they form different layers. The subtle layers among that is Duryodhana, and then this physical, if I want to go to the next slide, the physical manifestation of these desires is Dushasana. Now, if you remember, some of you might remember that this incident took place in the hall, the court hall of the Kauravas, where there was an attempt made to disrobe Draupadi. We'll see what Draupadi is. And who did that? It was driven at the order, I won't say request, at behest of Duryodhana, but Dushasan was the one who went and actually did this immensely dirty, crude, cruel deed of going and dragging Draupadi in the state that she was in and attempting to disrobe her. So Dushasan, he is the one who is the physical manifestation of these desires that Duryodhana represent, that are there in everybody's mind, and they virtually rule the mind, which is what Duryodhana is doing. And this conflict between Arjuna and Duryodhana, who wants to control the mind? Duryodhana is reigning there. Arjuna is trying to push him. He's trying to say, get up, 7 o'clock. You want to get up and you want to study. There is an exam in 2 days. You want to pick up your physics book and you have to start studying. And here is Duryodhana saying, oh, come on, for half an hour doesn't matter. You set the alarm for half an hour, and then after half an hour, then Duryodhana comes out, you maybe even more stronger. Just take tea and or sleep for another hour, and you have got the whole day left. And so there is this constant tussle going on. And what happens in Mahabharata, for those who remember, is Krishna comes to the darbar of the council of the Kauravas and says that the Pandavas, they need their kingdom back. What does this translate to? It's like the mind coming and saying, okay, I got to do some things. Let me do this. And Duryodhana refuses. He says these evil tasks, the evil desires that in our mind, they say, it's their death. If they let Arjuna in, it's their dead. And he's like, Krishna is like, at least give me something. They cannot. It's like somebody saying, I want to test an HIV vaccine, so I will give you some of the virus I have to inject in you, and then I'll test this vaccine. And you're like, no way. And he's like, it is just going to be a little bit. It doesn't matter. It's I'm not going to let you do anything because I am rolling this. Why would I want you to? Why do I want to risk this whole position that I'm in? I don't know if I have run over time because of this timing calculation problem that I had earlier, but maybe I will go for another 5 minutes, 10 minutes before I can conclude this session. So that's the lay of the land right now, where there are these in our mind. We have got Arjuna, Bhima, Duryodhana, Dushasana, the 100 Kauravas that are there, all sitting clamoring in this space and vying for their piece of this space, of this land. So this land that is there, it's the Kurukshetra is there. There's the occupancy over there is limited. So who is going to get to rule? And then now that you know that this is the case, who is strong over here? Who is being supported by whom? Is there even a way for us to conquer? There are just 5 Pandavas and 100 Kauravas. You can see the imbalancing thing. But then Bhima has got the strength of 1,000 elephants. So potential is there. It's up to us how we use it. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Now this is Draupadi. Now Draupadi is married to all the 5 Pandavas. Again, if you were to just take the story at the face value, you might feel it odd, how come at those times, how do we have a woman marrying 5 people? I haven't heard of it in any other epic that I know of. There is the other way around. There are examples of a man having more wives. That's kind of common. Although, but a wife having more than one husband is not that common. And now you see why it is the drive for a person to be free from these desires. The drive for a person to be liberated is what Draupadi represents. So now you can see why it makes sense that Duryodhana and others, they hate her. And Dushasana goes and he's trying to destroy her because her existence, her very existence is a threat to their survival. And her being around is a source of fuel to the 5 Pandavas. The Pandavas, they all the while, they cannot let go of this event that has taken place. Supposing one of them forgets, Draupadi, actually, you will find in the Mahabharat many times, she will come and remind them. She tells them, I hope you haven't forgotten what has happened. And when all this incident happens, she has taken this oath that she lets her hair loose and she says she will not braid her hair until one of the Pandavas gets the blood from the chest of Dushyasan. So now you can see the graphic that is there and why it is the way it is, that in order for a person to be liberated, it is obvious you have to get over somehow or the other. I won't use the word get rid of the desires. You have to be unaffected by them is a better word. And that is what one of the core mantras of the Bhagwad Gita is, that if you try to take this enemy up front, there's a good chance you will lose. You have to have the ability to not be affected by it, to try and ignore it, which is not easy. Ignore is not an easy word because it's easier said than done. We will say we have got the whole 18 chapters of the Bhagwad Gita, where Krishna is getting into details of what is happening. Now that you understand some of the things that are there, it is very, very interesting, exciting. What are the different players here? How are they interacting? What can be done about that? Now that you know what is happening, it's a very exciting thing to look at. Okay, let's look at the next thing. Now, the next thing that I have here is something called prarabdha, and you don't have to really believe in this, but I guess another 5 more minutes, then I'll stop. What the theory of reincarnation says is that man is born with a baggage of karmas. So this is a very big topic, but to really boil down the ocean here, there is a cause and effect. So you do something, you perform a karma, and you see the effect of that. You kick a ball, and the ball goes and lands somewhere. The ball might hit a wall and then a post and somebody else, and then it will go and land somewhere. You know, it's like it will follow the laws that govern the trajectory of the ball, gravity, this, that, and it will go and land in certain places. So also this karma that we do, that karma has an effect. There's a fruit of this action, and it has to be realized whether you want it or not. It will be realized. This is just a theory. So you perform an action, and then it is going to result into either a good result or a bad result, and you experience either both of them. You have to. You don't have a choice. You have to experience it. So now, what it says is that you accumulate these actions over this lifetime, and then you are not able to experience the results of all the actions that you have performed in this lifetime, and therefore they kind of come with you, and this gets into the theory of reincarnation. And when you are born again, they come along with you. That's the theory. We are not going to get into it. So this baggage that comes with you even before you are born, this baggage comes with you, that is there are actually two words for that, sanchit and prarabdha. But so Gandhari and Shakuni, both of them, what in a very straightforward, realistic sense, or relatable sense, I don't want to say realistic, it is basically those genetic things, those things of your personality that you have inherited, however it has come to be, whether it is genetics, whether it is this karmic theory or something else. However, when somebody is born, they inherit some personality traits with them. That traits are what Gandhari and Shakuni represent. Once again, we can get into a lot of details into this. Not useful. Just enough at this moment to know that we come with some of these traits, and so they can help us or they can go against us, but we have to live with it. That's how we are born. And I think I'm going to stop at this point. There are a few other characters left, but you can begin to see now. I think it's starting to take shape, all these different players that are there in our mind and how they interact with each other, and then we'll see where Arjuna stands. So thanks for listening to this episode, and till next time, goodbye, and we'll meet again next week. Thank you. Bye.